Hi everyone, I'm Shalini. I am associated with Haya as a community leader in their Health Over Stigma campaign. And I'm also the founder of menstrual awareness campaign Alhar in Bihar. And today I welcome you to this live by Haya in their COVID-19 Charcha series. And we will be discussing about healthcare accessibility and the third wave. We have two very important guests joining in. So while I add them, I would request you all to please drop in any questions that you might have, and we'll try to take them up if time allows. I will just add the guest to the live and then we'll begin. I can also see some of the people joining in, and I hope that we can have more audience in a few minutes. Our guests have joined the live. Hi, Dr. Chandra. Hi, Kushali. Let me introduce all of you to our guests today. Dr. Chandra here is the consultant physician at Helvetia Medical Center, New Delhi. He's also the medical advisor to the delegation of the European Union in India. While Ms. Kushali is the strategic alliance and partnership lead at Project Bala, which is a youth-led organization working towards menstrual health and hygiene, and engaging in COVID relief work centered around the same. Hi, Dr. Chandra. Hi, Kushali. Welcome to the live, and thanks for making time for it today.
Hi,
Hi, guys.
Shalini.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
having
so
us.
much for the introduction. Hi, Dr. Chandra.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Right. So my first question is actually directed towards Dr. Chandra. So, Doctor, we've come across many statements and theories about the second wave and the spike that we've just witnessed. One of them in particular being that we people have been careless in general about adhering with the COVID protocols and hence the catastrophe. So, how much would you confirm or deny this? Because was it carelessness or was it more of an accessibility issue or was it lesser investment in healthcare? How do you see it?
I'll be rather diplomatic here and say that it was an equal mix of everything. We were to blame as well. In terms of being careless, we were definitely to blame to a certain extent. However, I would definitely put a major portion of the blame on the accessibility to healthcare and definitely the healthcare infrastructure that we already have. The unfortunate situation is that our healthcare infrastructure was rather shaky to begin with. For a country where we have 10,000 patients for one doctor, when you have a catastrophe of this proportion, there is no way a healthcare system like this would survive. So definitely the healthcare infrastructure that we had was to blame. That's primarily. Secondly, of course, we all, including myself, we all sort of gave up. After a while of sticking around in isolation and in quarantine, it is human to just step out and to be normal and to try to be as normal as possible. Unfortunately, we overstepped our boundaries there as well, but for a reason. None of us had actually thought that there would be a second wave coming in which would be this bad. We would have all expected that there would be a second wave. If you look at history, we had the Spanish flu earlier. There is always a second wave. There is always a third wave. We knew that we fought off the second wave so well, so chances are that we might fight off the third wave as well. What we did not take into account was the mutation that that virus would have, and that would be this dangerous. So, firstly, yes, the healthcare. Secondly, yes, us. Thirdly, and probably crucially, and maybe I'm making a political statement out here, but our leaders are all to blame. Our leaders are absolutely all to blame. When you know that there is a situation where people are dropping dead like flies, left, right, and center, the least you could have done was to upgrade our medical system. You had an entire year, didn't you? We saw what happened and we saw what could have happened. And unfortunately, almost nobody took a stand. Almost no upgradation of the infrastructure was done. And sad to say, it's pretty much still the same. So I'll say in response to your question, it would be a good combination of all three: our personal behavior, the healthcare infrastructure, as well our leadership. So I would blame all three here.
Right. We can see some of the comments and remarks flowing in. So if you want to incorporate those as well in your comments for the upcoming questions, please make sure to do that. Thanks, Doctor, for that answer. Moving to Kushali. So we know that, the pandemic has had effects everywhere, not just in terms of COVID, but there are also repercussions in various aspects of healthcare, like sexual and reproductive healthcare services or access to them. So since Project Bala works around menstrual health, which is associated with sexual and reproductive health, what are the major issues or challenges that you've seen in the communities you work with resulting from the pandemic?
Thank you so much for this question. Actually, it's a very nice question, and this takes me back to when the pandemic actually started. And we, as an on-ground organizations, have always worked with the community when we were present there, and everything changed because of the pandemic. Project Bala has also done a research during the time to understand that how the pandemic has actually made the community suffer. And there are some very hard-hitting and very disturbing things which we came across during that time. So our community, where we have been working for last 4 years now in Rajasthan, 60%, more than 60% saw decrease in their finances, decrease in their household income, which directly affected their menstrual health, because now this wasn't a necessity. At that time, the necessity was food, the necessity was water, the necessity was ration, but not the menstrual health. Out of this 60%, 97% switched back to the old clothes which they were using before, which took their menstrual health accessibility away. Apart from that, another one of the very hard-hitting facts which we came across was because of lack of mobility, they cannot go back and buy their sanitary pads. And during that time, we realized that, they need a more sustainable solution which stays with them for 2 years. And at that time when, Project Bala intervened there, almost all of them, 97% of them switched to reusable pads because that solved the issue of mobility. That solved the issue of buying sanitary pads every month. Apart from that, there are a lot of places where in schools, the girls are getting supplies to menstrual absorbents. And because of closing of schools, 80% girls had to go back to their normal old clothes which they were using before. And these are so many things which have happened during the time because entire conversation shift to masks, PPE kits, sanitizers, and nobody took in account in the starting that menstrual health and menstrual absorbents are also necessities. So these are very hard-hitting issues which we have seen in the community.
Absolutely. I think access to menstrual hygiene products is definitely something that we've also seen in the groundwork that we've done. I have a follow-up question to what you just mentioned. So what were some of the solutions or interventions that Project Bala did in order to solve this challenge that you just mentioned about?
So as I shared that, we did an entire research study in Rajasthan with almost 400 menstruators there to understand the problems actually. And once we understood that what is happening in the community, we came up with different kind of solutions which we as an organization haven't tried before. The number one is making strong local partnerships. So we as an organization cannot go there and take workshops, cannot train the individuals and tell them about menstrual hygiene. But organizations which are locally based there can do it. So we started training of the trainers. We made our own app, Bala Boss app, where we put all our videos of training and we shared it with the organizations. We took Zoom trainings, we took Google Meet trainings where we trained the trainers, and now these trainers can go there and train the individuals and make them aware about them. The second thing which we did was understanding that how livelihood has been suffered as well. And for that, we created our own individuals there and provided them employment. So how we did that was in the communities, we trained few women in the communities who can become spokespeople for Bala and who can become salespeople for Bala. They sold Bala pads there, and from that they generated livelihood for themselves as well. So these are few solutions which we have tried during the pandemic itself.
Right, and kudos to all that you're doing. You mentioned a lot about the digitization aspect of it, for which I have a question directed towards Dr. Chandra, but I think we'll take it up after this question that I have for you, Dr. Chandra, which is that when we talk about tackling the third wave or being prepared for it, etc., vaccination becomes a major topic to discuss on. And when we talk about vaccination and when we talk about access to other healthcare services like sexual and reproductive health care, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions going around, which results in people refusing vaccine or not going for vaccine. For example, not taking vaccine during menstruation because it might affect your immune system, or pregnant women or lactating mothers should not take the vaccine, and stuff like that going around. So could you briefly tell us about some of these popular myths, especially keeping the context related to sexual and reproductive health, and also in general, if you want to add something about the myths going around with regards to vaccines, please?
All right. Now, when it comes to pregnant women and lactating women, it has been clearly decided that that pregnant women and lactating women are safe to take the vaccination. All right. A lot of it comes to the fact that the benefits outweigh the risks. All right. When you are pregnant, and definitely if you get COVID, the risks are massive. We've seen enough. We've seen enough during the past month about what has happened and multiple deaths in case of pregnant women. It has clearly shown that taking the vaccination makes the situation much better, even if you're pregnant and if you're lactating. All you need to do is make sure you have a word with your gynecologist before going to get the vaccination. If it is an uncomplicated pregnancy, or if it is any sort of a situation where the baby has any sort of other immune disorders, you may want to have a word with your gynecologist then. However, most research, and in fact all major publications, have clearly shown that it's safe for pregnant women and lactating women to take the vaccine. In fact, for lactating women, the antibodies which you develop, you will be able to pass on a few of the antibodies to your child. All right. So it's pertinent that you go and take the vaccination. And before you do so, have a quick word with your gynecologist just to be sure. All right. Another common question which you rightly just asked a short while ago is that the whole concept of taking the vaccination or avoiding the vaccination during menstruation. There is absolutely no connection between the two. It's a myth of the highest order. Please, if you're menstruating, that does not give you the right to avoid the vaccination. Please go take the vaccination, because there is no harm in taking the vaccination during menstruation. That's just a myth which is out there. Anytime, just get the vaccination. In fact, the more the population is vaccinated, the quicker, or we may delay the third wave, or we probably will have a wave which is not that as deadly as the second wave, which we just saw. So ideally, get vaccinated as soon as possible, irrespective of you being pregnant or lactating. Now, when it comes to some other myths, I've heard a lot of women complaining that while taking vaccinations like the mRNA vaccine, if somebody's taking a Pfizer vaccine or a Moderna vaccine, and they actually say that it's wrong to take the vaccines during pregnancy or during lactation. That is absolutely wrong. Please go ahead and take the vaccination. There is nothing harmful with taking the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines during pregnancy as well. Okay, like I mentioned, just have a word with your gynecologist and you'll be fine. And when it comes to some other myths, there have been plenty. I mean, the recent one going around literally made me laugh. The one which I actually think people are getting magnetic properties after getting the vaccination. I mean, we all need a good laugh, and so occasionally such problems do make it funny. But please go take the vaccination. Nobody's giving you a magnetic personality after the vaccination, so go take it. Okay.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Doctor. Also, since Kushali mentioned previously about the fact that digital mode really helped them switch and reach out to the community at large. So talking about digitization in the healthcare system, we've seen a lot of switching to modes or switching to hybrid modes, teleconsultation, use of AI-based platforms, and so on. So do you see any major challenges upcoming in case of this digitization? Because this is seen as a mode to make it more accessible for the public, right? But at the same time, where do you see the challenges in the acceptance of it or the adoption of it in both the doctors community and the patient community? And what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's actually been a very good switch towards easy accessibility via teleconsultations and by digitization of medical of medical services for that matter as a whole. What one needs to realize is that during what we just faced in the last 1.5 months, healthcare was almost inaccessible for all of us. Everyone. I couldn't get access for healthcare for my family. Literally, it was me taking care of family members at home. I wouldn't get it. I'm pretty sure all of you have had situations where you've experienced the utter madness that we went through, where invariably you're trying to call up a doctor, there is no one available. Invariably, you're trying to desperately search for a medication, something like a remdesivir or an amphotericin B. Nothing is available. What helped? The one thing which helped was communication through social media. What helped was speaking to your doctor via teleconsultation when you can't go to the doctor. It definitely helped. And I think that this is going in the right direction. I absolutely think this is going in the right direction because in the future, God forbid, the third wave is as dangerous. We need to be prepared through easy access on the phone, on through social media, and try to get in touch with as many known faces as possible. Try to get in touch with your pediatrician. Try to get in touch with your doctor. Try to get in touch with your GP. Be communicative so that you are well prepared with what is about to happen. All right. I do not want to scare people. I do not want to say that, oh, there's a third wave coming in and, there'll be a massive death rate or something. But the one thing which we've learned from the past wave is to be prepared, is to absolutely be prepared. There are a lot of theories going around stating that that the third wave might be affected by might be detrimental for kids. All right. Now, there is no medical evidence showing this. I want to clear this out that till now there is no actual medical evidence or scientific evidence showing the fact that the third wave will affect kids. We are only speculating because the first wave affected the elderly population. The second wave affected the slightly younger population. We've had people at the ages of 20, 30 dying, unfortunately. So it is in a natural progression that the third wave will be more detrimental for kids, especially because kids are not vaccinated. I'd like to clarify this, that if you notice the statistics from the first wave and the second wave, I do not want to go into too many details, but overall, out of the total population in the first wave, just 8% of the kids were affected. In the second wave too, it was 8% of the kids, approximately 8 to 8.5, that were affected. However, the second wave had a much larger population, a huge population that was affected. We were getting 4 lakh cases a day. So percentage-wise, the number of children affected were a lot more. All right. But clearly, there is no Delta variety, Alpha variety, Lambda variety, which is directed more towards children or predisposes towards children. All right. So at this stage, I just want to clear it out that do not fear, that do not panic that children will be affected after this. However, it is good to be prepared. So in line with the digital communication with which Kushali and you rightly pointed out, my suggestion would be in the next few days, in the next few weeks rather, go ahead and make sure you communicate with your pediatrician so that you have a backup ready. Whichever locality you are in, locate your nearest pediatric hospital, especially with a PICU, with an NICU, a PICU and a NICU, so that you know where the nearest doctor is available and where the nearest hospital is available, just in case if you panic, you can rush there and make sure that your kid is all right. Again, digital communication, make sure that you have your doctor on the phone, have a quick word with him if there is a quick teleconsultation that you can do. A majority of kids now, because it's the monsoon season, you're going to get symptoms like a cough and a cold, so many other symptoms of malaria, dengue, a common fever which is out there which can be treated. However, it is human to be scared. It is human to just realize that, oh my God, if this is COVID. So you would obviously want to have a word with your doctor, right? The best thing you can do is quickly have a teleconsultation instead of taking the kid to a hospital where you are probably risking yourself and the kid to work in the balance, right? So it's very, very crucial that this digital communication process happens. So I'm very for, and in the future, I actually would like to see that that this increases further, communication with your doctors increases further, unless it's a certain situation where a doctor has to examine a patient in person. For example, there are simple things which this hand can diagnose, which cannot happen through a telecommunication. When you have a certain stomach ache, when you have a certain pain in in around the abdominal area, it's still the old-fashioned hand which will palpate the area and will figure out whether it's a liver inflammation, or if it's an appendicitis, or if it's if it's a stomach infection. So what we would like to focus on is that unless it is absolutely essential, teleconsultations and digital communication is absolutely perfect. And I completely agree with Kushali and you that we should probably promote this further. I see a couple of folks trying to send in some questions, and if you would like to send in your questions, just type them in. I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Doctor. I think my next question will be to, of course, you, Kushali. Since you mentioned about, and we've been talking about the digital mode and everything, and that is definitely an intervention that you have done, and you've observed the various changes and the expansion of outreach through that. So what other interventions has Project Bala introduced in the pandemic for MHM or SRH access, and what are some of the insights from the first and the second wave you have that you want to carry forward so as to prepare for the third wave and its impact in this space?
So, Shalini, one thing which we have, seen different in both the waves which has come, and majorly what we have seen is there are so many people out there who want to work in this particular domain. There are people out there who are creating solutions every day. And I think if one of the organization has already done it, it's not necessary to create the same solution again. I think what is necessary is to collaborate so that solution can be passed on to various people. So, because it will save time, right? Nobody has to create same thing 2 times. So it will save time and we will be able to reach many more people. So like as you said that, there are a lot of things which we have been working on. And one is our IEC, our awareness module. We have translated it to many languages now. We have our 8 modules which have been translated into various regional languages like Bengali, Hindi, English, Gujarati, Marathi. And I think now an organization working in Maharashtra does not need to make it again in Marathi. They can anytime reach out to Project Bala and take that in Marathi in their language and pass it on to the beneficiaries there. So that's something which is very much necessary because a lot of other organizations who have not been working on SRHR before have now transferred to it because that's the community's need. And at that moment, it's always great to collaborate with the organizations who have been working in these departments. Other than that, one thing which we came across is a lot of youth wants to work towards MH sector. A lot of youth wants to work towards SRHR sector. And they are just finding the right platforms to do that. So Bala this year also came up with a 6-month-long fellowship. It's an entirely virtual fellowship which offers it to the youth, the leaders, the change makers who wants to work in this community. And they can become a part of the solution where they can create new modules, where they can find out these organizations working on ground and partner with them, where they can market it properly so that people on social media, because during the COVID times, during both the waves, social media was a huge support to find the right people. So, put it out there so people and different organizations know that Project Bala is doing something like this and this can be used further. And as well as connect us to as many as organizations possible so we reach the beneficiaries of the entire country.
Right. I think you mentioned some very insightful points over there, especially the fact that collaboration is key here to fighting the third wave and its impact on all aspects of healthcare. Moving to Dr. Chandra, based on the insights that we've had from the first wave and the second wave, and also what the developed nations, etc., are doing, besides digital mode, which we've already addressed and you've already talked about, what are some of the other insights that we've gained from these pitfalls that will be useful for preparing for the third wave, besides what you've already mentioned, Doctor?
Okay. I think basically we are lacking, and in a big way, we are lacking in our healthcare infrastructure. Okay. I don't have to spell it out. I think we all know that in the last one wave, no amount of money, no amount of connections could get us a hospital bed or an oxygen cylinder. That's how disastrous the situation was. I agree that probably no other country would have been able to manage it as well because of the massive population. However, we could have probably improved a bit more in the last 1 year, increase the number of available healthcare workers or maybe train some healthcare workers. We are woefully low in case of the number of doctors, in case of the number of nurses, in case of the number of hospital beds. So I would like to say that if there is an insight that I would like to focus on specifically, is to singularly focus on healthcare and improve it right away. We cannot afford another loss of 300,000 lives. It would be detrimental, not just lives, also the economy. It would be detrimental. Like other countries, we should focus on upgrading our infrastructure right away, upgrading the vaccinations right away, upgrading the medications, the availability of medications right away. It should not be a situation where, as far as I remember, even basic multivitamins were not available at medical stores. Simple medical, simple syrups, Zincovits and simple cough syrups were disappearing from the shelves, and that's how bad the situation was. So, singularly, if that one answer that I would have to your question is singularly focus on healthcare from every aspect, and also when it comes to sexual and reproductive health as well, every aspect of it, easy accessibility, and upgrade the healthcare system. The outreach should be massive in every possible way. Unless an entire population is healthy, there is no way can a country survive unless the entire population is healthy. Everyone needs access to healthcare. A basic hospital bed, a doctor. We have one doctor for 10,000 patients. So when you see doctors fighting it out in government hospitals, I know what they've been through. I've been one of them. I've been trained in a government hospital, studied in a government hospital, done my residency in a government hospital. In fact, in Safdarjung Hospital right here in Delhi. Things are not easy. It is horrific what people go through there and the kind of mental trauma doctors go through there. So all we can do right now is say that it's still not too late. We've had a good example of what things can be. It can be even worse, but it's just the right time to start building hospitals, get in more hospital beds, start training more staff, get your healthcare infrastructure and the accessibility to medications and vaccinations in right now, as soon as possible. That's the one thing which I would singularly focus on.
Absolutely. I think one could not have put this better than the way you did right now. And I think we are in the final minutes of live right now. I cannot see any particular questions in the chat, but what are your final thoughts or message that you would want to convey to all the viewers, and especially focus on the controllables out here? Dr. Chandra, would you like to go first?
All right. The one thing which I always focus on is to not panic. I know the situation is terrible. What we just faced was nothing short of a catastrophic nightmare, right? Everybody has had a loss in their family. Everybody has had a trauma that they faced. Us doctors have been through the same. The mental trauma of this all was horrific. Most of us have slight PTSD syndromes and symptoms which have persisted because you're so used to listening to the constant screaming of patients on the phone throughout the night, begging for help, begging for oxygen, begging for a bed. And the sheer helplessness of you not being able to do anything to save a life is what destroys you, So you're mentally healing right now. Irrespective of all that, we fought through. We've managed the second wave and we've come out of it. Most of us have. A lot of us have lost loved ones, but we've still come out of it. My suggestion would be to be prepared, to not panic, and to focus on basic practical situations in life. Right now, when you realize that our leaders really did not help us much, it's just each other that we have to look out for, why not start having backup ready right now? All of us First of all, follow basic protocols, social distancing, masking up correctly. This needs to be done properly. I still notice folks out there without masks or masks below their chin running all around the place. It's not just for them, it's for the others. A common excuse I see is that I've recovered from COVID, I've gotten the vaccination as well. So the mask is somewhere between the chin and the bosom and it's hanging around here. That's not correct. What you need to remember is that irrespective of you healing from COVID, the virus can still be detected in your nose and your throat. Once it goes down to your system and replicates, that's when your antibodies take over and destroys the virus. However, that part in your nose and your mouth and your throat, let's say if you're near a loved one at home and you just cough, you still have chances of passing that virus on to your loved one. You wouldn't want your loved ones to go through what we've just been in the last one wave. So for yourself, let's do some practical stuff. Mask up, social distancing. Apart from that, wherever you are located, get familiar with your nearest healthcare services. Get familiar with your nearest pharmacy. Get familiar with your nearest oxygen supply center. These are things which we really need to focus on just to be prepared for the next wave. More importantly, watch out for signs and symptoms. Make yourself familiar with what the signs and symptoms are. And most importantly, please do not self-medicate. Have your doctor on the phone. Have your doctor, in a situation where you need to speak to your doctor, book a consultation, speak to your doctor, but do not self-medicate. A lot of mistakes happened last year, in the last wave, when plenty of people decided to self-medicate, pop in steroids, pop in blood thinners, not knowing that these were detrimental to their health. So if I have to sum it up, I'll say, look out for each other, be prepared, be practical, and don't panic.
I think these were some very important points. I hope that everyone has taken a note of it and will, like you said, look out for each other and make sure that all these things are ensured. Kushali, if I have to ask you, what would your final message or call to action be for the viewers?
So I think Dr. Chandra has put it very beautifully for the third wave which might come, or for current situation as well. I would like to talk more about how the organizations can work during this time and how we can support the communities who do not have the resources currently. So, as I mentioned before, collaborate, ask for help. Social media has been of great help, though social media has made a lot of fake news as well, but on the other hand, there were people who did not know each other but have arranged oxygen injections for each other through social media. Ask for help, collaborate, reach out to people who know this. Don't take anybody's advice if they have just been through COVID. Take a medical professional's advice, because as Dr. Chandra just mentioned, that a lot of people are self-medicating and a lot of people are giving medication to others because they have recovered from COVID and they think that they know everything right now. No, COVID has been very different for all the people. And I think it's very, very important just to believe the medical professionals who have been trained for this and not somebody else.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Chandra and Kushali, for joining us today. And thank you so much for all that you've been doing. And we wish that you take care, stay safe, and keep doing what you're doing. Thanks to all the audience members for joining in and for engaging with us today. And do join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the next live COVID-19 Charcha series. Thank you so much. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.